Before the Great Depression era, people with vision and drive to make their passion come true worked harder than ever. Some of the great minds made it to the top and thrived for a long time, but only a handful of those people and their idea, or rather say, product, made it all the way in today's market and are still doing great. And if we're talking about such a story, then mechanical mastermind Henry Ford and his creation, Ford Motor Company, is definitely one of them. On a farm of Springwells Township, Michigan, on July 30th, 1863, William Ford and Mary Ford gave birth to their first child, Henry Ford. He grew up with a love for his mother and a passion for mechanics, which was started from a gift he received from his father, a pocket watch. He used to take the watch apart and put it back together in under a minute. Such skill didn't go unnoticed, and people started to bring their watches to him for repair. At such a young age, he was well known for his watch repair skill. But he realized his real passion for mechanics when he came across a steam engine for the first time at the age of 13 during a school trip. He was astonished by it, and his amazed mind couldn't forget the experience. He started to work on steam engines, and at the age of 15, he constructed a steam engine all by himself. But right after this, his life also experienced a nasty blow. His mother, Mary Ford, died due to illness. Henry Ford loved his mother so much, and that love was what kept him coping with the farmer lifestyle. With his mother gone, that drive also perished, and soon after, at the age of 16, Henry Ford left his father's farm and decided to write his own future from another perspective. In Michigan, where he moved, he found many opportunities to hone his skills on machines and understanding the mechanism in a deeper way. He took those opportunities, and in 3 years, he learned a lot from those works. He also worked as a watch repairman, and his understanding on this sector grew as well. But we're not talking about a watch repairman story, are we? At the age of 19, Henry Ford decided to go back to his father's farmhouse, and he continued his experiments with the little spare parts he had available there. Luckily, his father also bought a portable steam engine at the time for his farm. Henry started working on that engine non-stop and became so good at understanding the machine, neighboring farmers also started hiring him to operate their steam engines. His talent and craftsmanship didn't go unnoticed this time again, and he was hired by Westinghouse Engine Company of Schenectady as a steam tractor engine repairman. His workplace was the entire southern Michigan, so he had to travel a lot for his work. During this travel in 1885, he met Clara Jane Bryant and married her in 1888. Henry received 40 acres of farmland from his father as a wedding gift, but Henry wasn't interested in farmland in the first place. In 1891, Henry Ford joined Edison Illuminating Company of Detroit as an engineer. He was quickly promoted to chief engineer in 1893. With the promotion and the extra money he was getting from the job, he had finally got enough resources to experiment on a gasoline engine. Henry reached great success with this experimental work in 1896 and created a self-propelled vehicle. He named the vehicle the Ford Quadricycle. At the same time, he also got to meet another mastermind, Thomas Alva Edison. Thomas Edison saw Henry Ford's experimental works, and he was greatly impressed. Receiving such a compliment, Henry Ford's thirst for work doubled, and he designed and created his second vehicle within just 2 years. Henry Ford also received financial support from people like William H. Murphy, and with such support, Henry resigned from his position and started his first company, Detroit Automobile Company, on August 5, 1899. But the company failed to perform due to low production rate and high price of their product, and it was dissolved in 1901. After this, Henry Ford transferred his devotion towards racing cars. With the help of C. Arnold Wills, Henry Ford created a 26-horsepower automobile in October 1901, which was less than a year after his company got dissolved. This 26-horsepower automobile became the talk of the town, and his previous investors, such as William H. Murphy, saw this popularity and decided to back him up again, and formed Henry Ford Company on November 30th, 1901, with Ford as chief engineer. But Henry had problems with his investors again, because his primary decision was to make more racing cars, when his investors wanted him to make passenger cars to sell to the people. This created tension between Henry Ford and his investors, and in the end, the investors brought Henry M. Leland as a consultant. Henry Ford didn't like this, so he decided to leave the company and take the company name with him. Henry M. Leland later reconstructed the whole company and named it Cadillac Automobile Company. With 2 failures, Henry Ford understood 2 things. One, if he wanted to make his dream work, he would have to create a company where his voice would have the most amount of authority. And two, he would have to fix the production rate problem to succeed. In his first attempt, his company had this problem, and Detroit Automobile Company only made 20 cars a year. This was way too low to compete with other companies. Third time's the charm. This time, Henry Ford knew what the actual problem he had to face was if he was going to create another company. Only this time, he was collected and started where he left again, in the racing car field. He joined with former cyclist Tom Cooper and made an 80-plus horsepower racing car called 999 in 1902. This car broke many racing records, and in 1904, it broke an all-American record and established Henry Ford's name as the best American designer for racing cars. With such a reputation, Henry Ford was approached by investors again. One of them was Henry Ford's acquaintance Alexander Y. Malcolmson, a Detroit area coal dealer. Together with 11 other investors, they formed a company named Ford and Malcolmson Ltd., which was later changed to Ford Motor Company. Now that Henry Ford created his third company, he had to address the problem that he needed to solve to his investors. At that time, car production work was slow and expensive, so only the wealthiest people could afford them. Henry Ford wanted to change this. He wanted to make a car that was not only cheaper for anyone with decent income, he also wanted to ensure quality. He hired skilled people and gave one company to make all the parts he needed to assemble his car, because his previous experience was multiple companies working on different car parts only makes the car production rate slower. But the real change, a revolutionary idea, came to Henry Ford when he visited a slaughterhouse in Chicago. He saw the assembly line system, and suddenly, he had this brilliant idea of implementing the same technique in his factory. In 1904, he made a big factory and employed over 300 workers, and started his experiment on assembling cars. This experiment actually partially worked and increased his car production rate 5 times, and Henry Ford's Model N car became the best-selling car in the country. In 1905, Henry Ford came across another big break, vanadium steel. It was 3 times stronger than any other steel available at the time, and it was also lighter. Henry took initiative and built his own manufacturing company to make all necessary car parts, such as the engine, transmissions, and other parts needed to assemble the car. With these 2 elements, Henry Ford worked on his new car, the Model T at the time. Most of the car was designed to work as a racing car, but Henry Ford wanted to make a car for daily use, and the Model T was exactly that. However, it was also the most expensive car that he had made at the time. But that didn't stop this car from becoming a success, because right after the release, Ford Motor Company received 15,000 orders for the Model T. This made Henry Ford realize that he needed a bigger factory to run a bigger assembly line. So, he built a bigger factory in Highland Park in 1910. With the biggest assembly lines being operated, and the massive success that the Model T brought, Ford was making more cars than all other companies combined. In just 6 years, 50% of all cars on Earth were made by Ford Motor Company. Since his production rate increased, he also reduced the price of the car, making it more affordable for the working class. He also raised his workers' salary and gave them 1-hour break time, something other companies didn't do. This decision was mocked by other motor companies, but later, this strategy worked like magic. Skilled workers from all around the world were coming to Michigan to join Ford for work, making Ford's motor company unstoppable. These newfound workers also made 24-hour operation possible. Slowly, Henry Ford began to buy his other investors out of the company. This made Henry Ford the sole owner of the biggest automobile company in the world. Until 1927, the Model T was Ford Motor Company's biggest cash cow. During the Great Depression, Henry Ford kept the company running with his shareholders, despite them being unhappy about Ford's sole decision-making power. With Henry Ford's son, Edsel Ford's tragic death in 1943, there was no other choice for Henry but to run the company at the age of 80. The company was losing more than $10 million a month at the time, so he had to transfer his authority to Henry Ford II, his grandson. In the 50s era, Ford started to work on their innovation and slowly lifted themselves from the loss. At that time, Ford introduced rear seatbelts, 6-seater cars, seatbelt reminder lights, and other things in the car industry. In 1964, Ford launched the Ford Mustang to the market, and the car became an instant hit. Ford also introduced multiple successful cars in the 80s. This cemented Ford as one of the most successful car brands in the world. Today, Ford holds its respectable position as one of the world's leading automobile companies. Ford provides almost 17% of the cars in the world today, which makes them a company with the net worth of $257 billion. Ford made $17.9 billion in profit on $136.3 billion in revenue in 2021. What Ford did for the working class people through its innovation made life extremely easier to get by. Ford made cars for the common man possible, and today, millions of people with decent income can provide a car for themselves because of the revolution Ford started, while staying at the top of the profit margin. Such a feat is admirable in any way you can describe, and Ford deserve all the compliments in the world for their out-of-the-box thinking and innovation.